we discussed the cost estimation methods. That is topic number 3. And about the cost estimation methods, we looked at the classification of the cost estimation methods, whereby we were able to identify that these costs are classified into 2. We have mathematical methods and also non-mathematical methods. So just as a reminder, can someone just remind us of these methods here? Is there someone who can help us to identify these methods? Somebody just to mention, let's start with the mathematical methods. Is there someone who is able to identify to help us know the mathematical methods which we discussed the other week? Remember we said we completed everything in topic number 3, and therefore I expect all of us to be well equipped with any knowledge or any question that is touching on topic number 3. So I'm being told that one of the mathematical methods is called regression method, which some people call ordinary least square method, and others also call it simple regression. That is the first mathematical method. The second mathematical method, somebody to confirm. The second mathematical method, I'm being told that we call it scattered graphical method. Scattered graphical method. So somebody is telling me that those are the only mathematical methods that we discussed the other day. How about non-mathematical methods? Somebody? How about non-mathematical methods? That's where we meet the first one, I-law method. The second method after I-law method, the second method is engineering method. How about the third one? Accounts analysis method. And then do we have the last one? Do we have the fourth one? Do we have the fourth one here? Yes, we have the notes. So regression analysis has been mentioned up here. Regression analysis is under mathematical methods. We are now discussing the non-mathematical methods. So I said, for you to understand this topic in a simplest way or in a simple way, basically look at what we call the advantages and disadvantages of these methods. Advantages and disadvantages of these methods will really help you to understand what they entail. So once you know that, it is very difficult for examiner to ask you a question that describe for us how regression method is being applied. No, what they will basically do, they will give you figures, they will give you the variable, both dependent and independent variable. Then down there, they tell you use regression or ordinary least square method to calculate the cost estimation function. It will be very difficult for them to ask you on that, give a description of how regression method is applied. it will be very difficult for them to tell you that maybe describe the scattered graph. They basically give you figures and tell you to come up with a cost function. Remember, at the end of the day, you must have this final product, which we discuss that y is the total cost. This one here can also be translated into total cost is equal to total fixed cost plus total variable cost. Remember, the total variable cost is dependent on the units of output or activity level. If I've produced 0, if I've spent 0 hours, then automatically the total variable cost will be 0. At that point, I've paid rent for the entire month. Even if I produce 0 units, even if I produce 10 units, my rent amount for every month is fixed and constant. And therefore, at 0 units of output, the total cost is equivalent to the total fixed cost. My total cost here, if total variable cost is equal to 0, is the same as the total fixed cost. So this total fixed cost at 0 unit, at 0 activity level, then I will call it the total fixed cost. And what does it represent? Letter A. So this letter A is the total fixed cost. It is the total fixed cost. If I'm going to draw a graph, which graph is that? The scattered graph method. The scattered graphical method, when I'm going to do or come up with this function from this particular graph, then my y-intercept, at y-intercept, x is equivalent to 0. At what point is this curve crossing the y-axis? The value of x will be 0 at that specific point. And at the point which it crosses my y-axis, I call it the fixed cost point because I've produced 0 units. And what is these units? They are represented by x. So when x is 0, it is going to cross my curve or my y-axis. How do I call that? It is y-intercept. So at y-intercept here, it is y-intercept. And at y-intercept, x is equal to 0. What does this tell us? It is telling us that when we have produced 0 units, we've already incurred some cost. We have the value of A. We have it crossing the y-axis. This is what I'm referring to. We have y-axis. We have x-axis. Here is the total cost. And then here is the units or activity level at that particular point. So when I have my curve here, it crosses this line. It will not start at 0. Of course, the total cost function will be starting at a given point here. So this region here, I've produced 0 units. But already I have incurred some total cost. So this total cost at this particular point, it is the total fixed cost. And where is my y-intercept? Y-intercept is where this curve is crossing the y-axis at this point. What is the value of x? It is 0. And that's what I'm trying to explain up here. Once I do that, I am going to have a curve, the total cost line. The total cost line, I'm supposed to get the slope of that particular line. How do we get slope of a line? It is change in y over change in x. Another name of slope is the gradient. It is the gradient of that particular line. And that gradient is now the variable cost per unit of output. So I will come here and look for the coordinates. I will come here and look for 2 coordinates. I can call it z, I can call it t. So I have the coordinates at point t, let's say 12, 17. And at point z, I have coordinates of 10, 13. Order of writing coordinates, we discussed that very well, that it is x, y. So it means at 12, when x is 12, y is 17. I come at this point, look for my x here. I come and look for my x here. When x is 12 here, my z is, or my y is 17. That is at point T. So it is this particular point. When x is 10 here, this one is 17, here will be 13, and then this one here is 10. So that is what we are referring to. That's how we write the coordinates. So this particular point, change in y, and this one is change in x. When I put change in y over change in x, I'm going to get what we call gradient, the slope of the curve. That slope of the curve, as far as management accounting is concerned, as far as our topic number 3 is concerned, as far as scattered graphical method is concerned, we are not going to call it the slope. We are not going to call it the gradient, but we call it the variable. We call it the variable cost per unit. Variable cost per unit of output. When we produce one particular unit, then we are going to incur the total cost or the variable cost of B. So if I want to get the total variable cost, as we've all seen, it is BX, whereby B is the variable cost per unit and X is now the activity level. X is the activity level. And we've also said that if X is the activity level, it does not depend on anything. Our total cost, our Y, for us to get the value of Y, we must know the value of A. Then it will be determined by the units of output, which is X. Variable cost per unit will remain that. Our variable cost per unit will remain that specific value. So what happens is the changes in our total cost will be dependent on the units of output, because fixed cost is already fixed. Variable cost per unit is already that specific value. It's a constant value. What makes our total cost to change is basically now the activity level, the units of output. And what is this units of output? It is the value of X. It is the X value. That one now takes us that we can also put Y and X. So the value of the changes in value of I or Y are determined by the changes in value of X. That one now makes us to call this Y here dependent variable. And then it makes us to call X independent variable. It does not depend on anything. It does not depend on anything. It is the only item that determines the value of Y. If I have 10 units, I'm going to have this different or this specific value of Y. If I increase the units of X to 100 or to 89, then I will have a different value of Y, courtesy of changes in the amount or units of X. So that's why we call X the independent variable. That is statistics knowledge. When we come to management accounting, the examiner will basically give you the units of output or activity level in terms of hours. Then they give you the total production cost. They not tell you that this one is X, this one is Y. But from your knowledge, from what we've discussed here, you should be able to identify that based on the information given to me, the total production cost will be my Y. The total units produced will be my X. So from that particular point, you replace X with the figures of the statement given there. You replace Y with the statement given there. Once that is done, then we now proceed to use our formula based on the demands of the examiner to calculate the cost function. So that is basically what we did, and that's what we want to discuss as we move forward. That is what